Hello all, I'm Jeff Jones and welcome to today's webinar, Secure Remote Access, Solving a Whole World of Problems. In today's webinar, I'm going to explain exactly what makes our Secure Remote Access product a truly unique solution. And I'm going to do this by recounting a real-life tale of support ticketing woe that I've experienced many times throughout my career. So at the end of this webinar, you'll know exactly why Secure Remote Access is not just the best solution to help you fix a problem, it's the best solution to help you fix a whole world of them. Before I start that, a little bit first about Admin Bar Request. So a Danish company founded in 2006 by system administrators and with the main ethos of creating simpler tools for other systems administrators. And in 2017, we created, or we invented, probably a better word, the SaaS EPM. So that's all about enabling customers to deploy just the right amount of admin to just the right kind of group of users for just the right time, just the right amount of time. So this is probably something that we're most well known for. Actually, probably even more well known in the last couple of years since we've been doing some sponsorship with our rather good value for money racing driver, Kevin Magnussen. And also you can see here some of the well-known brands that have chosen Admin Bar Request to run their EPM for. So as mentioned, with EPM, we solve the problem of privileges on endpoints. However, earlier this year, we created a new product called Secure Remote Access. And for that, we really aim to solve the problem of fixing problems. And there's quite a well-known proverb, which is mighty oaks from little acorns grow. And me, with my background as being an IT manager, perhaps, you could look at this comment, this proverb, and think of it as a sort of positive thing. But from my perspective, working in IT as an IT manager, I might have a slightly different slant on it. And I would probably maybe use a slightly different version. Major headaches from little tickets explode. And what I'm kind of getting at with that is that in a day-to-day kind of reality, we needed to make a secure remote access solution that could kind of handle the kind of chaos that sort of ensues when users need their issues resolved. And I don't know how many of you listening have had the situation before, but you have a user with one problem, and then you go to try to address that problem, and then to solve that problem, you have to fix another problem that itself needs another problem to resolve, and all the rest of it. So you end up with this situation of connected problems, and it just gets kind of problematic, I guess. And that really is the whole driver for us with Secure Remote Access, is to make a system that kind of can cater for all those different eventualities. And actually the point of this webinar is kind of really to retell a common story that hopefully all of you will have experienced. So like a kind of the 5 stages of the journey of what a typical terrible ticket, as I call it, and break that down and show how our system can help address those different stages. I think the first sort of part of a support interaction is really the first call. And you're kind of thinking, well, this is quite a straightforward thing. A user has a problem, the supporter needs to go in there, jump in and fix it. What can kind of go wrong? Well, actually, there are quite a few things that can go wrong. For example, many of the remote control products on the market today, they don't have any real concept of identity management. So the users will need to give the person on the other end of the phone a sort of code, and obviously that person on the other end of the phone could be a genuine support person, or they may not be. So that is a problem all in itself. Many users have got free versions of this same package and have installed it on their work computer so they can access that computer, from home. And that becomes very difficult for IT teams to kind of control exactly who is connecting using the company's paid for system with enterprise controls and who is actually using the freeware non-authorized. So that is difficult. And what that means is that it's really difficult to know at any one point of time, who has access to what. And from our perspective, that's a big issue. So you want to sort of take back, to sort of coin of a phrase that has probably been used a few times, but you want to kind of take back remote control because it has generally got out of control. So you want to deny and block these user portable installable solutions. And actually our EPM could probably help a bit with that. You need to make sure that any solution you implement has enterprise MFA for all access. So that scenario of a mystery person phoning up a user and saying, I'm with IT, well, they wouldn't be able to access that person's computer because they'd have to pass the MFA as well. You also don't really want to rely on control software that could be manipulated as well. So if you're using a browser plugin free solution, then that really minimizes the ability of someone using the wrong control software or control software that is just totally bogus and potentially malicious as well. And ideally, you want to implement a solution that gives you centralized approval and screen recording and auditing. Again, emphasis on the centralization there. And also with integrations, you want the system to be able to integrate fully with your SIEM systems for security and also your workflow for things like, Jira and ServiceNow, so you can integrate it within your existing ticketing system. So with admin by request, we have that platform and that framework that has all those integrations, that has that centralized approval already built in for our EPM. We're just adding the secure remote product to that. And then because it's on our platform, it then benefits from all of those existing benefits for the integrations and things like that. So anyway, if we have a very quick look at what a simple support request looks like, I've got a I can just show you very briefly what this looks like. And the key here is it is very simple, and it is something that the user cannot install, the user cannot remove, cannot tamper with it. There is one way that a user can request support. So if we have a quick look at that, you can see I go to an icon, I go remote, I have to put in the details of why I need support, the support gets submitted, it appears in the portal, and then in the portal, this is where the agent can then decide to pick the request up or deny it. And if you had, a workflow system with ServiceNow or something, that could get routed to the right department. So you can see that's a very simple way for a user to request remote control, remote support from the help desk team. Okay, but that, like I said, is the first part in this journey. And usually with these first initial requests, it's a simple problem. The support person will do the connection, fix the issue, and then you would hope that would be it. But then this is where we move on to the second step, which is what I call the Columbo. And I don't know if any of you know about Columbo, but he has this famous catchphrase where he will ask the unwitting suspect one more thing. And this is quite often the case with support. The person would need support for something, would have that issue resolved, and then almost immediately after it's resolved, they'd come back to that help desk department with another issue. And this other issue probably is something that's been nagging them and annoying them for quite a long time. And so this is kind of like the second step of the process. And with this, What normally happens is that with a second issue, you would need to request that user create a new ticket, a new process, and that all creates new friction. So there's not really a huge incentive for the user to follow this sort of process. And also they're going to get given a new support agent, and that support agent will be unfamiliar with the user systems and will probably have to spend a lot of time recounting again and familiarizing themselves with what is going on. And these issues, these sort of follow-up second things, are generally things that have been kind of festering for quite a long time. The user is essentially having a go at asking someone to fix it because they've fixed this first problem. They're going to have a go and see if they can get this really annoying thing fixed as well. And if what I'm saying is if there is friction there, and if it's difficult for that user to submit an easy follow-up, these things tend not to get addressed because it's just too much work for the user to risk investing his time in doing it. So what you need is a way to allow the support person on that initial call to quickly kind of ping back and kind of have another look and try to see if they can address this issue. So we say the best place to solve a mystery is to revisit the crime scene. So it's kind of you want to make sure that user can submit a quick follow-up, and for the help desk person that's been working on their system to kind of jump back on easily. And the productivity gains of that obviously is huge. And it's important that these things are kind of nipped in the bud, because what tends to happen if they're not fixed, the issues will be worked around, and there'll be some process that they'll come up with that will sort of work around it, skirt around it, and it'll end up becoming part of a process, and it will never get fixed, and that will just lead to a lot of inefficiency and potentially security issues as well. So what I'm talking about here is if we thought of back at the first step where the user requested support, here you can see the kind of the step 2, which is the support person that's probably been emailed or slacked by the user. I've got one more question, I've got one other thing I want you to help me on. Can you quickly just jump on and jump back into my system and have a look for me? So this is kind of how that process works. So the support person will just click on a link in the browser. They then have to, this is very important, the support person needs to perform an MFA. So again, you've got full identity and access management before that support person can send this notification to the user's desktop. Then the connection is made, and you can see using just the browser that the support person can now gain access to that system. They've been allowed in by the user, and they can have a quick look and they can see exactly what is going on, hopefully solve the problem. However, there are situations, common situations, where the problem is not as easy as the help desk person has envisaged. And what would you do in that situation? Well, you can certainly keep going and you can carry on trying to solve this problem. Meanwhile, the user is sitting there getting rather impatient. And also the user is seeing what the support person is doing, which is quite off-putting if you're a technician, to know that the person you're helping can actually see all the little tricks and experiments you're trying to pull to try and see if you can troubleshoot the issue. So what I would say is you need to have a system that can enable the help desk user to switch seamlessly from a screen share type of remote support to a full unattended mode, where the technician can work in solitude and where they can basically have what I feel is the best chance of fixing the really complicated problems. So when it's not possible to solve something in a single swipe, I would say, users are going to give you 5 minutes or so. They're generous, maybe 10, to work on a system where they're tied up. So you need to basically limit your screen share support for quick fixes or recon. I wouldn't recommend extended periods doing screen shares because users are just going to get annoyed by that. And as I said, techies will generally not be at their creative best when they know that someone is watching. It's just kind of you're under a bit of pressure. You need time to think and experiment, and it's not always best to have someone actually watching you. And it is also possible that you don't want people to see what you're doing either, because you might be typing in commands that you don't want users to see. So you would want to go for our unattended mode. And what this does is that it means that you can go into an endpoint without troubling the user. Okay, so the user can kind of log off, can go home, and then you can go back in, spend as much time as you like in that system, do experiments, review logs, and you're not inconveniencing the user, and you've got a lot of time to yourself to actually have a good think and fix this or try and fix this problem. And as I mentioned, this happens at a time that is best suited for both user and technician. You can do reboots, you can do reinstalls, you can do patching. All of this can be done in a stress-free environment, which is obviously what we want. And that is the environment which is best conducive to fixing problems and finding solutions. And you've got lots of time, as I said, to, privately work through problems. Some of the things you technicians are going to try, I know I've tried some kind of crazy things sometimes, and it's sometimes you get lucky. So you just can work much better in a private environment. So I can give you a quick view of what unattended access looks like. It's actually very similar to screen share in that it's all action through the portal. So again, it's important that we've got MFA configured because we don't want anyone having access. But in this situation, I've added on approval as well. So if I'm going to give someone, a technician, kind of unattended access to someone's computer, then I may need to require that technician gets approval. And this is where the approval workflow comes into place. So the technician would click on remote. The technician has got to put in a business justification for why he needs unattended. The request goes in, the request is approved, the technician gets the approval, and now they can go in. They still need to perform the MFA, so we know exactly the technician is genuine and they are who they say they are, and then they can go in to this endpoint, and you notice that the technician doesn't need a username and password because we're handling all that behind the scenes. So the technician doesn't need, we don't need to give that technician credentials on the system that could even be kind of shared or reused. What is happening here is that we're generating behind the scenes credentials, but these aren't actually usable by the person doing the remote. That, I mean, in the sense that they can't use those credentials anywhere else because they only exist on this one system. So this supporter couldn't use those credentials to do something lateral on another computer, on another workstation. They only work in this particular environment on this computer right now. Anyway, so let's imagine that our technician did have lots of time to look at this problem, but sadly, the root cause doesn't appear to be anything to do with this computer. And that is also quite often the case. We need to go beyond the endpoint because sometimes problems are not simply a case of they're on the endpoint, they're somewhere else. And I like to think of problems as not necessarily a single point. They could be multi-point. They could be connected to lots of other things external to that endpoint. So we need to kind of branch out. Maybe the problem here in this particular story is something external. It could be, for example, a firewall, ARP table for a Wi-Fi system or something. You see that it'd be very difficult for me to determine that on the endpoint. So I'd need to be able to get access to the things that I think it could be. But those things that I need to access to check are not running agents. So up to now, we've been accessing things with admin bar requests running, and that is how we've done the remote access. But what if I've got something like a switch or an access point that does not have an agent because it just simply can't install one?
if I want to get access to things like access points and switches, I may need to have just a quick look just to rule it out. I'm going to have to go through a lot of pain to give people to get me access to those multiples of things. I may need to get VPN access. I may need to get, even physical access, serial console access. It might be a massive challenge to get access to all of these things. And I just want to have a look to see if that is or is not the cause of the problem. And because of the mountain of stuff I've got to do to get to check all these things, I might as well just give up if it's just too difficult. So what we want to be able to enable is for technicians to be able to access these things that do not run agents. And we have a component of our secure remote access called an on-premises gateway, and that you put in your on your subnet on any site you want to use it, and that can discover local devices. And as long as they're running the standard protocols, so for example, in the example of our kind of firewall, that might have an SSH kind of ability to access it through SSH. So it'll discover that, and then I'll be able to access that through our system. And there's no limit on the number of these on-premise gateways with admin bar requests, so you can go over as many of them as you like. And you can, with these gateways, you can configure the access to be automatic, or as we saw previously with the unattended, you can add the element of approval in as well. And of course, wherever we have anyone accessing anything, we want to make sure that MFA is supported and enabled so we know that only the right person is actually getting access to the thing we want them to access. So just to give you a very simple demo of this, you can see that I'm going to access a straightforward plain vanilla firewall, and I'm going to go and check the ARP table on that. So I'm going to go to remote, and that's going to, I need to enter credentials because I don't have an agent on the system, so I will need credentials to access. But again, this has all been done through the browser, and then you can see once I'm on, I can do the ARP global, and I can have a look and see if, for example, that endpoint agent ARP address was missing, then that might be a clue as to what's going on and why the user can't do what they want to be able to do. So it's a very good example, and I could basically see how easy it is. I could basically access multiple things, do multiple checks. I don't need VPNs, I don't need serial ports, and it all works. And in addition to all of this, we screen record or can screen record and fully audit all of the stuff you've seen today, and it's all stored in the audit log. So you get to see exactly what has happened when someone connects to something as well. Anyway, let's carry on with our story, and let's imagine that we still don't know the answer to this problem, and it's starting now to get to be a rather pressing issue. So probably what would be a smart idea would be to accept defeat and call in the vendor, basically, because that's kind of what one might do if you suspect there is a problem with some hardware or something. You're probably better off starting to think about calling a vendor and get the vendor to come in and have a look. However, organizing access to a vendor is a massive pain in the access, as we say. So it is quite the case with getting a vendor to come in. Techs will always want to try to fix problems themselves. They don't want necessarily to get external help because it's a bit of a pride thing. It's not just pride though, because going through the process of getting clearance for someone external, even if they're a vendor, to internal resources can be extremely painful and time-consuming process. So therefore, with the kudos on the one side and the admin work on the other side, techs will probably try to carry on to try to solve the problem internally, really until it's just needs to be, it got so bad that the problem just needs to be solved. And the problem is that the more time you've invested in something, the harder it becomes to kind of almost call for help because you put so much into it already. And meanwhile, the problem just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, more disruptive, more expensive, and it's all not a great situation. But I've seen this happen in many, many different situations in my career where someone has tried to fix a problem, will not give up, and will refuse help. And the more work they put in, the longer it runs. And it's just sometimes a very bad situation. And there's something called a floppy disk moment, which I don't know if any of you know about floppy disks, probably not. But there was a time when I was working for a vendor and I got called out to a database server that had failed, and the customer had basically done everything they could to try and fix it. And they didn't call me until it was absolutely catastrophic. And I walked in the data center and I immediately saw that they'd left the floppy disk drive in the disk, and I pushed the button, out it popped, and I just did a 180 and went home. And that was it. So what I'm saying is that from a vendor's perspective, sometimes these issues are super, super simple, but it's obviously only easy if you know the answer. So you need to be able, with that in mind, to enable a vendor to or a contractor to get in, to have a look, get eyes on the problem as easy as possible. Okay, because again, it could be something really simple to the vendor. They may have seen this problem before, and you may not. You want to give them credential-free access with approval, with screen recording, and perhaps just the one time. And you don't want to have to add these people to your internal systems, Active Directory or Entra. And because of that, there's no need to delay requesting outside help because there's no friction to get them in. And so therefore, you can get the problem fixed much quicker before it gets worse and more expensive to fix. And of course, because less contractor time is needed, there's less impact on the business and there's no residue. With residue, I mean, if you're adding vendors manually to your systems, it's the temptation to leave them in there because you might need them back in again. So you want a system that does not leave any residue. So we'll have a quick look at the vendor access demo, which is different from the other access that we've shown you because it uses a separate portal, which is specially for outside parties like vendors and consultants. So on the right-hand side, you can see this is the interface that my vendor would access, and they would log in using, again, their single sign-on. And then once they log in, they can see just the things I want them to be able to see. Now, I've enabled approval on here as well. So the vendor's going to have to request approval to access the thing I've given them access to get access to. That goes through the approval system. As you see here, I can then approve that vendor to access that thing. And now the vendor can click on that connect button. And now the vendor gets access, not before passing the MFA that we've set up as well. Again, to make sure that vendor is who they say they are. Now the vendor can access the server, and note that we didn't, again, need to give that vendor credentials. And we don't want to because we don't want that vendor accessing anything else apart from the unique thing we want them to work at. And in this situation, the vendor is identified, a bit like my floppy disk incident, that the whole problem of this whole episode was because a web service needed restarting after an update. And that is as simple as that. And that's really a very good sort of example of how this 5-stage journey can run. And you can imagine that the follow-up, the unattended access, the accessing of the wireless system, the getting the vendor involved, that can all take days, maybe weeks. And with this system, you can do it in minutes. And that's kind of the point as to how we designed it as it is. So takeaway message to you is in a whole world of problems, you need a whole world of access to avoid a whole world of pain.
And with that, that's the end of the webinar. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Don't forget that you can get access to all of the functionality that we covered in the webinar by registering for your admin by request free plan and deploying the secure remote access to your environment. Remember, you get all those features of the paid edition, the remote support, unattended access and vendor access, and there's no expiry. You get 25 secure remote access licenses and 25 EPM licenses included with that. So that's a very good deal indeed. I'll be remaining online here to answer any questions that you may have. But until then, have a great day and hopefully we'll see you soon. Cheerio for now. Bye.